Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Silver Lab. If you missed this last week, the goal of today is to take 3 students that we're going to be working with this afternoon. We have Vinod here, firstly. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Silver. Give me 1 second, I'll mute the stream on my end. If you missed this last week, so we have Vinod here. We have Chris. How's it going, Chris?
Hey, it's going great. Very nervous. Boom. Thumbs up.
You can watch Vinod suffer through my wrath first, and then you'll feel better by the time your time comes in about 45 minutes. And I think Samantha's joining us later for her review. So we have 3 different databases to get into today. Vinod, back to you. This is your graph. Before I ask you about this a bit more, I'll just tell the viewers what we're up to today. We're trying to get 1 actionable step for each student to take away and work on. Less is more when it comes to leak fixing. Yes, you all have a lot of stuff wrong with your game. We all do. But we can't fix it all at once. And what we're trying to do is tap into the type of leak, the primary leak, as we say. And this is very much what we're up to with our starter kit at Carrot Corner, which is totally free, by the way. If you grab that, you'll see that we diagnose you with the primary leak in those 3 videos. We get you to do a little checker sheet and diagnose yourself, actually. And then we get you to play 1,000 hands with a hand review method in mind to try and fix it. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to showcase the same thing, but we're going to pitch it at these students who are Silver Lab students, which means that they've just started or are getting their teeth into the Silver Carrot pathway at Carrot Corner. So back over to you, Vinod. Talk us through where you're up to in the education side of things. Firstly, you've been working through grade 1 Carrot Poker School, Vinod, yeah?
That's right, yes.
And where have you got up to in that? What lecture are you on?
I've gotten to lecture 10. So yeah, basically done with the first set of things, and I'm going to do the exam. That's up next, I think, when I finish 10. Yeah. So besides Carrot Corner, I've been heavily influenced by a little bit of the Hungry Horse stuff. You know, I play mostly live. So I mean, this database shows about 14,000 hands. I've probably done about 800 hours of live poker in the last 8 months or so. So roughly 100 hours a month. Obviously, much softer, you know, than online. I am sort of exploit heavy in my style of play. But also I'm not a big fan of the all-out exploit Hungry Horse style. You know, I'm more attracted to the sound theory, type of thing that Carrot Corner teaches. Yeah. But besides this, I've also done a few courses from a few other sites. You know, like poker coaching and Upswing, a little bit. But yeah, so far, Carrot Corner seems like the best fit for me.
Cool. So we've got like 3 layers of diagnosis today, Vinod, for your game. We have the bird's eye view, like, you know, several hundred feet up in a plane looking down at your graph like we're doing here. This graph says a lot. This is not a graph that is ambiguous to interpret. We'll say more about that in just a second, but this already gives me a very concrete idea about what's going on in your game. Then we have the stats layer, where we look into further evidence, breaking this down a bit more, which spots are causing the problem, what do we want to focus on, and then we have a hand review layer where we get into a few hands, make sure we're reviewing them with the right protocol, and we're going to go over the Carrot Corner protocol for everybody today, which is theory as a starting point, then a population layer, and then an action, and taking just those 3 steps and keeping it nice and streamlined. Then I'll give you some homework. So that's the roadmap. Beginning with a prediction, you've mentioned that you've taken a lot of different types of poker educational content. I think it's likely that you have very many fragmented, floating about vague concepts, ideas that clash with each other, superficial ideas that are not really integrated in a cohesive web. They're not really working together in a foundational way. And I would imagine that your brain is kind of like a YouTube viewer who can be hijacked by the most pretty thumbnail, aka thought, that's currently whizzing past, and is getting hijacked and pushed and pulled in many different directions by all of this different material that you've assimilated, but not perhaps fully yet. So I don't know how that sounds as a prediction of what your thought process is like, but do you feel like there's a bit too much disorganized stuff, and clutter in there?
From a high level, yes. I would say in the last month or so, I have more of an organized thought process, when I play. But as an overall picture, I think that's quite fair to say, that there's a few half-baked ideas, all mixed up together.
Okay, so what do you understand by this graph? Like if you were looking at a graph like this from someone you just met, how would you think they played? What would you think was wrong?
Yeah, but basically, I think my primary leak type is the blue line leaks. Calling too much. Taking too many hands to showdown. That should be folded earlier. A little bluff heavy. So but I mean that has overall turned out. I mean that. So when the bluffs get through, that's fine. That works out okay. But I think overall that is the picture, not folding enough. It's the blue leaks is where is my primary leak type.
Yep. So we'll talk about the three primary leak types, and this time I'm going to be very clear about this. Let's not confuse these with three lines on a graph. The lines on the graph tell the story of showdown winnings, blue line. Green line is the overall winnings, and red line is the non-showdown winnings. But the red, blue, and green leak types are different. So the blue leaks are similar to a losing blue line, I suppose you could see it as. Like, you call too much, you press the call button in too many bad spots. I definitely think blue leaks are your primary leak type. You don't actually get a red line like that just by being really aggressive. If you're super aggressive everywhere, you will have a lot more variance in this. You'll have a swingier red line. It'll be jagged. It'll have a lot of medium pots that you're winning and then big pots that you're losing. So a red line that's a function of lots of really aggressive play only will sort of go up a bit more, up a bit more. Then you'll get stacked because a bluff doesn't work. Up a bit more, up a bit more. It'll be like a ladder like that. 3 steps up, 1 big step down. That's what a really aggressive player that bluffs all the time's graph looks like. You probably do bluff in the wrong spots sometimes, and you are aggressive. I can see that from your game. But what's causing that red line to go smoothly up and the blue line to go down like this is so steadily is a lack of folding where you need to fold. And as you know, there's a lot of spots that are very underbluffed. There's a lot of situations where your opponent's ranges are far too strong, and we're not folding enough in those spots. So let's switch over now to the stats view here in Poker Tracker. And that's going to corroborate the story of the graph. So we have, looking at post-flop here, or pre-flop even, we have a 22.8% fold to 3-bet stat. So not only, is post-flop too stationary at the moment, and we're going to try and remedy that today, but you're also taking an incredibly wide range into like a 3-bet pot. That can be catastrophic because 3-bet pots are situations where ranges get very narrow very quickly. So if we're taking, a lot of hands post-flop and then being too sticky in these underbluff big pot 3-bet pot situations, that's going to annihilate the blue line, and it's going to be that sort of blue leak actually starts pre-flop in many of these cases. So the first thing I'd want to do is just honestly just get you referring to range charts and just figuring out where you're actually calling 3-bets where you shouldn't be. And then what I'll do is I'll briefly remind you of a few cold spots. So hot spots are pre-flop spots where you can be more aggressive, more active than a chart suggests because EV naturally flows in your direction. So when you open the button, for example, that's a hot spot. It's very, very good for you. Money flows your way. The button handles that better than the big blind does in the human realm, right? They're in position, life is easier. You want to play more buttons as an opener than a chart suggests. When you open the hijack and get 3-bet by the cutoff, you want to play way less hijacks calling 3-bets than a chart suggests. And there's 2 reasons for that. One is that people are too tight when they 3-bet at lower stakes, and 2 is that it's an absolute disaster zone to play. It's a minefield. It's very, very difficult for the out of position human, and you're going to lose more EV there than a chart predicts that you will, even with equal skill edge. So the cold spots I want you avoiding are calling 3-bets particularly out of position or calling really big 3-bets. If we can start avoiding those and folding the hands that are neutral on a chart, and definitely folding all the ones that are negative on a chart when we face those 3-bets, that's already just going to be a really stabilizing anchor to your game. It's not particularly sexy or glamorous, but it is going to fix a lot of stuff. How does that sound to you as like a starting point before we move on to post-flop here?
That sounds fair. I have been taking too many 3-bet spots, out of position. That's again something that I've been consciously trying to correct in the last month or so. where I take 3-bet pots more in position, and more playable, suited, connected, hands, not dominated hands. I've been trying to do that. I'm trying to get something like, like 40%. Is that a good fold ratio? For 4 to 3
it's not enough. It's not enough, but it would be a big improvement on 22%. You want to be folding 60% plus to a 3-bet after you've opened.
Got it.
Because if you think about it, you're putting in 2 big blinds, right? Or what's your normal open size? 2.5 or
2.5?
2.5. You're putting in 2.5. So say the small blind 3-bets you to 11 big blinds. They're risking 11 to try to take down a pot of 1.5 from the blinds, right? And then you're 2.5 open. So that's 4. So they're risking 11 to try to win 4. So that's a really bad risk reward ratio for them. They have a strong linear range for getting involved against like a hijack opener. And so you don't have to defend many hands there at all in order to still, be playing a reasonable strategy. There's no game theory requirement to defend lots there. That's why the fold frequency in GTO is in its 60s in that spot. And then in practice, people just aren't that loose. They're not that aggressive post flop. So the biggest mistake you can make is call the 3-bet too wide in situations like that, and then call down just because you flop top pair or a second pair on a low board or something like that. It's not going to go well for you overall.
Right. Yeah.
Yep. So we want to get that stat up to 60 or so eventually.
Right. You'll see a bit of fishy play, like people min opening, some kind of ISO, min 3-betting,
Sure.
if I open to 2.5, people will just do like 5 or 6.
Sure.
I fold almost nothing to that size.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, bigger sizes, that makes sense,
Yeah. So that will skew the numbers slightly, but generally those 3-bet sizes, even in fishy games, don't happen often enough to skew it that much. So I'm very confident there's a big over defend going on here. And I don't mind you being loose pre-flop. If you want to open more buttons, you want to isolate a fish that limps, you want to 3-bet against a weak reg when you have position, you can stretch the boundaries of the chart there, but you have to understand that when you're in a cold spot, like the ones I mentioned, you actually want to recoil and shrink and play less hands than the chart advises.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Looking at your post-flop game then, the problem is just mainly a lack of folding. Yes, you are aggressive. I want to defer the red leaks today, the ones where you're too aggressive. I do want to look at them with you at some point. They are a problem. They need to be treated. But, if you go into a hospital and your arm's hanging off and you're bleeding to death, the doctor can treat your high cholesterol later. It's a bit like that. Like, let's treat the most urgent problem, which is the blue leaks, the calling leaks, because this AF number, you're very aggressive. Like, you're betting river 62% of the time. You're not a shrinking violet of a player. You've got a 1-win soft flop of 53. That's mostly because you don't fold enough. You're raising flop C bet 11%. You're not a net by any means, but you're still running a very passive looking total AF. That number is calls divided by bets and raises. So for you to run that low in AF, meaning lots of calls compared to bets and raises, you have to be calling an absolute ton. You have to be pressing that call button in so many spots that are very, very bad in terms of EV. That's the only way that's possible, right? So let's get to the blue leaks today. Let's give you an actionable step, a mission statement. Let's understand that you're not on trial here. It's your play that's on trial, and your play is a result of your mental state when you played the hands. I want to make that very clear. Whatever you do in the hands that we look at in a minute is a result of the thoughts and mental state and emotions or whatever was going on when you played the hand. I want the you of today to distance himself from that and be able to say, that guy was in this mental state with these thoughts and here's how we correct it, rather than trying to bargain and reason and sort of say, I wouldn't normally do that. We don't want any of that. We just want to say, yeah, that happened. Let's figure out why, right? I know that when a student has loads of blue leaks, their level of thought, of understanding of poker theory or whatever isn't those blue leaks, but there's a reason that they are happening that's sometimes separate to what you're studying. So let's bear that in mind, okay, as we go through this.
Yep.
Cool. Went to showdown 38%. So if you're looking in on your database again a month from now, we'd want to see that number come down towards 30. We'd want to see the fold to flop c-bet go up towards 35 or 40. We'd want to see the total AF go up towards 2. And we would want this fold to 3-bet to be 60 instead of 22. So right now, in this state, it's impossible for you to be close to winning, like with these stats. These are stats that have to change, but they have to change in the right way. And I don't mind if you overcorrect. A student like you will not go that badly wrong by overcorrecting initially. So if your fold to 3-bet went up to 68%, I guarantee you it will not, no matter how hard you try, it will not go up to 68%. But if it did, I would look at that and be like, cool, great, that's much better than 22, 23. So don't be afraid of overcorrecting, and don't be afraid to fall back on a mantra of, I'm unsure and it feels a bit grim, therefore I just press the fold button and I move on with my life. Your problem is you're not pressing the fold button enough. So if you're ever unsure, I want you to press the fold button if you can't solve it in time, and there's no shame in not being able to solve it in time. Fold button's your friend, it's your ally. If you go to it, it will not let you down. The call button's hurting you.
Yep.
Okay, so let's have a look at some hands. Let's go to a hand report here. Guys, if I look like a very old person today in the way I'm using the mouse, if I look like I've got a hand injury, I don't. It's because I've actually just got a left-handed mouse for the first time in my life as a left-hander. And while I trust it will be better for me ultimately, it's horrific right now because I've coped with a right-handed mouse my whole life. So that's why I'm like so incompetent today with clicking things, if you're wondering, Vinod.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm not kidding, guys. It's so weird. It's so weird. Left-handed mouse. Anyone ever used one of these? Let me know. Right, so I'm going to go for max hands here. And I'm going to go to more filters. And the filter I'm going to put on is a very simple one. It's called River. And we're going to look at every street. We're going to look at where you've been too loose everywhere. But as I said last time, we keep our filters simple in this show. No really specific node work. Just broad primary leak diagnostics and fixing. So we put on the primary leak filter, which is you've made a river call. Just refresh this here. And what I want to do, okay, it's kind of assorted stakes, right? Which is why this looks a bit all over the place. I'm going to ignore the random bit of higher stakes that have been played here. And I'm going to go down to what seems to be your normal stake, which is 5NL. And I'm going to look at those hands. And I'm going to grab a subsection of them here. I'm looking at ones that have gone post-flop mainly, where you've not been all in pre-flop. We'll probably skip those unless they're like really egregious. I'm going to replay these hands. And yeah, let's switch over to the replayer here so everyone can see what I'm doing. Let's make this a bit bigger. And on the left-handed mouse, the left and right buttons are actually inverted as well, which makes sense, but it takes a lot of getting used to. Okay, so we have ace queen, we open, we get 3-bet by the big blind. This is another situation that's a cold spot. I'm not saying you should fold ace queen offsuit to this sizing, you shouldn't. But the big blind is meant to 3-bet. Not in the same way as the small blind is meant to 3-bet. What do you think I mean by that?
It's more polar. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah. Like a small blind would tend to choose the best hands. They would have a linear 3-betting range, whereas a big blind would choose some bluffs and some some bluffs and some good hands. You know, like a ace jack plus, maybe ace jack suited, plus subsuited connectors, some pocket pairs.
More specifically, the big blind is meant to 3-bet with really good pocket pairs, really big suited cards, and the biggest offsuit cards only, and then bluffs, right? They're not meant to 3-bet that often with the stuff in the middle, whereas the small blind is meant to 3-bet with all the stuff in the middle. So it's easy for the small blind to find the bottom of their range, in theory, because they just have to 3-bet with like jack 10 suited or something. It's not that difficult, or eights. But because the big blind naturally calls a lot of those hands against the raise, that's just what people do at 5NL. They call jack 10 suited because it looks like a decent hand, and they're like, okay, let's see a flop. They don't know that jack 4 suited is a 3-bet, or queen 5 suited could be a 3-bet, or ace 5 offsuit could be a 3-bet. And if they're not finding those, what's happening is that the aces, kings, queens, jacks, etc. are just like going into the range undiluted or less diluted than they should be, right? And then you're actually getting decimated more in this spot than theory says. So if you have a bigger 3-bet size here, like say big blind goes to 12 big blinds or 11 big blinds, you should just fold ace queen offsuit cutoff against big blind, because the hand is going to be getting decimated in terms of equity, and it will take a lot of skill to play this hand well after the flop, because you'll need to know when to get away from it there as well. So it's very important that you fold this against the bigger sizing in these games, for sure. Honestly, you could convince me that you should even fold to this size if you're going to play the way you're currently playing post flop, right? I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just like that would be a band-aid for now. But I think you can, after today, go on a mission to really tighten this up, and then you can make this defend. Okay, so ace 10-5 two-tone. Villain bets, flop, we call. Villain checks and we check back. Villain checks and we bet the river. Okay, so far so good. Then this happens. So this is very much a very black and white hand where our equity changes massively in the space of like 2 seconds. Because here, how good are we feeling about our equity, Vinod? How often do you think you have the best hand against this range here when they check the turn and the river to you?
Almost always.
Yeah, so you have the best hand maybe 90% of the time, 95% of the time, something that high. I concur. Yeah. So we go for value. Cool. And then this happens. How often do you think we have the best hand now? And I don't want you to overthink this. I want you to give me your honest, intuitive percentage answer. Best guess.
So when something like this happens, I mean, the thought that happens in my head is like, are you really telling me that, you have a better ace or aces, and you just slow played this, like you checked it down twice, I don't believe you, that's sort of what happens in my head.
Yep. So your thought process starts with what are the value hands you're telling me you have, and do I believe that you would play them this way? Yeah.
Right.
Cool. Okay. So it's very true that most value hands would not play this way. So you're actually, when you ask that question, you answer it correctly. Unfortunately, it's completely the wrong question to ask, but you've done a good job of answering it. Your intuition is bang on that most people don't play value this way, but it's the wrong question to ask. Why do you think that might be?
Because that's not that's not the reality I'm facing. Is that what you're saying?
No, it's just the wrong question. So it's kind of formulated incorrectly. You're saying, how often do you play a value hand in this way? That's the question you're asking. Does that tell you what your equity is? Or how often you're going to win if you call? Why does it not tell you?
It becomes sort of a meta question, right? It doesn't talk about, like what is my equity given this happened? I'm asking a sort of a hypothetical question, like, if I had aces or ace king, would I play it this way? You know?
What else affects your actual equity here then? So if it's not just about how your opponent plays their value hands, what else matters?
The action, or his sizing, like how often is he bluffing in this spot?
That's the thought. That's the only thought you need. How often do they play value this way, and how often are they bluffing, and which is more by how much? And do I have 36% equity in this spot? You have nowhere near 36% equity in this spot, and the reason for that is that while most people don't play value hands this way, if you click call, due to the fact that nobody ever bluffs this way, you'll still be shown a value hand the vast majority of the time. Let me give you an analogy if chat wants it. Chat, should we give Vinod an analogy? Yes or no? Vote now.
Yeah.
Just write yes or no. Chris, what do you think? Should we do an analogy?
I'm down for an analogy. I would love an analogy.
Okay. If someone says no in the chat, though, we can't do it. Okay, someone said yes. Okay, so we're going to do an analogy, guys. So let's imagine that 7 police officers, Chris, come to your door, right?
Yeah.
Or sheriffs or whatever you guys call them. I don't know what you call them. You probably call them sheriffs or something. And they have like guns and stuff. And they have like a convoy of vehicles outside. And they're like, there is a very dangerous man on a killing spree in your neighborhood, sir. We need you to lock your doors right now and go upstairs and not come out of your house until we give you the all clear. Right?
Okay.
What do you think is happening in that situation most likely? A, there is not a dangerous man on the loose, or B, there is a dangerous man on the loose?
There's probably a dangerous man on the loose.
Okay.
I would say.
Cool. So what if they came to my door and said that, and I reacted by saying, I don't believe you because it's really rare that there'd be a dangerous man on the loose. Like, that almost never happens, so I think you're full of shit. What would you say to me, Chris, if I reacted that way to the police officers?
I think you're... Just because something's unlikely doesn't mean that it's not happening at this moment.
So we have evidence to the contrary that strongly suggests that it
Right.
is happening.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if your house is on fire, you wouldn't not leave your house because it's really unlikely that your house would be on fire. You would take the more
Right.
important evidence. So back to you, Vinod. What you're doing here is you're effectively saying, I don't believe you because it's unlikely that you play a value hand in this way, or I don't believe there's a dangerous man on the loose because that hardly ever happens. You've ignored the fact that the police are telling you that there is this time, or in this hand, nobody ever bluffs here. Does that make sense, that analogy?
It does. It does.
It's a bit like, it's not a completely direct analogy because obviously poker's an alien world and our intuitions aren't honed in the same way. And that's why we need analogies. We need to compare it to something in life that is, in a way, what we'd say is a reductio ad absurdum. We're reducing it to absurdity, right? It's a philosophy term. And what that means is that if that is an analogous situation and it is absurd for you to not believe there's a murderer on the loose in that situation in life, then it is absurd for you to believe the villain is over bluffing here. And it means that we need to reframe the way you look at these spots, because your intuition isn't going to be able to cope with this, because your intuition didn't evolve or grow up in poker. It grew up in life, right? And that's why you can handle the mass murderer situation, but not this one. So in poker, you need to say, am I winning 38% of the time? That needs to be your question. It needs to not be about his story and whether he has value. It needs to be like, do I win this often? Well, what value hands play this way? Not that many, but you can see how someone might trap here sometimes. What bluffs play this way? Well, that's kind of insane. And it might not feel insane. It might be that you can concoct a story about how the opponent could be bluffing. And it could be that because you're a player that doesn't like to lose pots and tries to win too many, right? It could be that you do project that onto your opponents and you say, well, he's trying to make me fold because I checked back on the turn. He thinks I'm weak now. It's so easy to weave this narrative into your game. But in reality, humans are far more docile and transparent and honest in big pots than your brain wants to believe. And that's what I want you to use as your compass this week. So if a line is convoluted, weird, imaginative, and funky, it's very underbluffed in a big pot. That is a universally true thing that's going to save you a lot of money. If a line is easy to do, I'll give you another analogy. Only if chat wants it, I'll be faster this time. Chat, do you want to do it one more for good measure? One more? Okay. If you look at how people steal things, how do you think they steal things generally? Let's go to you, Chris. You're going to be the analogy judge because you're not involved in the hand analysis here. Do you think they
Sure.
put on big performances and create elaborate distractions and do weird shit and then steal something? Or do you think they be like take it off the shelf and try and leave the shop with it discreetly?
Probably B.
Yeah. Same goes in poker. Humans are humans, right? So when they're playing poker, they try and steal the pot in situations where it feels like they're going to get away with it, and they do it in very simple, low key, to quote the Gen Zs, kind of ways. So they will stab the river after it goes check, 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 check. Because they're like, oh, this guy doesn't want the pot, I've got nothing, but I'll just bet and hope it wins. What they won't do is check, raise all in on the river when they could have just bet earlier. That's what they won't do. That makes sense, Vinod? Why people don't bluff in that really elaborate, weird way?
Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah.
If he wanted to bluff He just bets earlier in a way that's not completely psychopathic to do so. It's completely psychopathic to bluff here. You have to be some form of utter maniac lunatic to bluff in this way at these stakes. You have to be wired like an absolute degenerate weirdo. Not just a degenerate, but a freak degenerate to bluff in this way. And most of your opponents are a bit more normal, a bit more mainstream poker player than that. They're just following their gut. Oh.
Is it fair to say that it's not that the villain is never bluffing, but it's just not often enough?
Yeah, it's not that they're never bluffing. And again, if you're not careful, your brain could go, well, it's unacceptable for me to be bluffed by this line. This line is such an offense against me. It's such a cheeky thing to do. It's such bullshit that if I ever got bluffed in this way, it would be unacceptable. And you might not be thinking that explicitly, but that might just be what your brain is doing. And that's a very bad metric for decision making, right? You need to allow yourself to get bluffed. I don't know, chat. How often do you think villain's bluffing with this line? How often would you say? How often do we get shown a bluff if we call here, chat? Let's see what they say. I'll see if I agree.
Can I say single digits? You know, it's not 0, but maybe like 5%. You know, I've seen. Okay.
I think that's fair. 15%, 5%. Yeah, I think it's somewhere in between those numbers, to be honest. I think so. And yeah, you will sometimes click call and win here. And then when you do, your brain will go, aha, I caught him. His story didn't make sense. And I figured it out. I got him. That's 100% how your brain's going to react if you do that. And that just stokes the embers of self-destruction in this respect.
Yeah, I am a big fan of, you know, like hero calling, you know, with queen high and winning, you know, stuff like that. It's nice when I pull it off, you know, but obviously, you know, I think my brain is sort of selectively, you know, focusing on when it.
Yeah, you're doing what you want to do because you enjoy it, and you've just got to be more objective. You've got to find enjoyment in the objectivity and the curiosity of what's actually going on, rather than like the narrative and what you want to be happening. 100%. Okay, right, guys, if you are joining the Zoom call and I don't know, message me on Discord because I never notice when people join the Zoom call. Right, okay, there's no one else joining for now, that's fine. And this is the thing, right? Here's another really cool like selection bias thing. So Lil75578 says, I bluff this way, haha. Do you know why we always get that comment? We get that comment because only the people who actually do bluff this way, like the 8% of people who bluff in this way, they're the ones that feel they have to comment at this point. That's why we see that so much. We don't see people going, oh yeah, I never bluff in that way. No one that never bluffs in this way, which is 92% of people, feels the need to say that in chat right now. So yeah, it's all, that's what poker is. It's a game of probabilities, right? Not just odds and how often you hit your hand, but the probabilities of your opponent being a certain type of human. Right, King 3. And you can see here, we're not caring about what hands come up. We're caring about the way you think today. That's what your mission is about, not fixing one type of spot. Just blue leaks in general. Okay, so you check raise here as big blind against cutoff, single raise pot with top pair and a flush draw. Don't hate it. We get a 10 of diamonds turn. I think your hand, this is getting a bit thin right now, so this is maybe verging on like polarization error territory. Do you know what that means if I was to say polarization error? Have you come across that yet in your studies?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Basically, when a hand is not good enough to value bet, or if it's too good to bluff, you know, and when you go ahead and bet anyway, that becomes a polarization error.
Yep. So this hand, because of the action sequence, and what you need to pay more attention to is action sequence, right? I want you to try and trace it a bit more, hand read by asking what happened post flop. This guy has bet the flop half pot, more than half pot, and then called a check raise. So already their range is moving away from bad hands, away from ace 3 of clubs, away from ace queen of spades, right? They don't have these hands, away from some pocket pairs. If you bet this sizing here and get called, you're probably in okay shape, but I don't think you're in great shape because a lot of the weaker pairs that called the flop are now folding. So the queens, the jacks, the sort of backdoor speculative hands that haven't hit anything might be folding now. Some open-enders and gut shots, the villain doesn't know what they're doing, might be folding here. That's by the by, though. That doesn't really matter. What matters is that if they call the turn bet, they're going to have a king quite often now, or better. Quite often. Not all the time, but quite often. So this is getting a bit thin. But I said I didn't want to get too much into red leaks, but just be careful there. You want to be a favorite after your bet gets called. Don't put 2 and 2 together and say I've got a draw and a pair, therefore I can do what I want. I think it's okay, but it's getting pretty thin on turn. Now on river, you have what kind of hand? Good, i.e. value bettable, bad, i.e. bluffable, or medium, i.e. check. What do you think?
It's a check.
Okay. To check, our opponent shoves. I want you to hand read now in the way that we discussed earlier, where you can ask about what value they play this way, but you also have to ask about what would need to be true for them to be bluffing here. So why don't you have a go at both, and we'll give it a bit more of a balanced take this time.
So value, it's 2 pair plus, and given it's triple Broadway, could easily be even better, like as good as a flush or a straight. And for them to be bluffing, they would have had to
hang
call.
on a sec. Let me just stop you a sec. So would you say there are lots of value combos? It's quite coherent that they have value. Would you say it's like moderately coherent, or would you say that it's like really unlikely that they play value this way?
This looks value heavy.
Not value heavy. I'm not asking at this point whether you think it's more value than bluff. I'm asking, is it coherent that they play their value hands this way? That's all I'm asking.
I think so, yes, because they're filtered by calling 2 streets, yeah.
Right, because we're going to work on doing both of these two things separately, intentionally, right? So value is coherent. There's actually a lot of value in this line, and it's very likely to play this way. A flush is likely to play this way, because if villain has a6 of diamonds, they're going to play exactly like this most of the time. It's very likely that some of their sets play this way, like their pocket 10s or whatever play this way. It's very likely that 6s or 5s could play this way sometimes. And then there's some other weird value hands like king, queen, or a straight. So I would say the bulk of this is a flush, right? With this sizing, that's mainly what villain's saying. I don't think 2 pair is jamming the river very often. I think when you're putting villain on a value range here, you should just say they're mainly saying they have flushes, but it is, relatively coherent that they can have a flush. There's a handful of combos and they're likely to play this way, so it's reasonable that they have a flush here. Okay. Now, bluffing. What would they have to do to be bluffing in this spot?
Yeah, for them to be bluffing, a hand that loses that I beat, they would have had to call a check raise on the turn. They would have had to bet with nothing and call a check raise, and then call an 80% turn bet, and then jam all in the river.
Yeah. So what would they have to have then to be bluffing here? Can you name some hands that could be doing that?
I mean, maybe like an open-ended straight draw with 6-5, or
7-8, you mean?
Something like that,
Yeah.
or 3-4,
Okay.
Or a busted hearts draw.
Okay. So the busted heart draw couldn't really contain the pair, or it would be like showdown, right? So busted heart draw would have to be like specifically, it couldn't be ace jack. It couldn't be ace 10 or ace queen or ace king. It couldn't be like king X or queen X usually, because people would just check that with the pair on the river. So for it to be like a showdown valueless bluffable busted heart draw, it's probably going to have to be something really precise, like ace 4, ace deuce, ace 6, ace 7, ace 8, ace 9, 7, 8, 10, 9. Even 10, 9 has a pair, right? So it's not clear that would bluff. So yeah, there are some draws that get to this river that could bluff, but here's the thing. Villain just went all in. All in. So what do you think the all in does when it comes to a flush? Do you think that's quite normal for people to do with a flush in this spot? And what do you think it does in terms of bluffs? Do you think that's a go-to bluff sizing for your population? Do you think they would usually bluff smaller? What do you think's going on?
With the action that happened before, I don't think a smaller size bluff would make sense.
Okay, that's not what I asked you.
Yeah, so if I were bluffing here with
not what I asked you. Think about the population. I'm going to keep stopping you when you do this because you're projecting, and it's really the source of the problem. So what you just did there is projecting. I said, do you think the population would choose that sizing when you bluff? And to answer that, you went to your understanding of poker, your expertise, and how you would make sense of it if you were villain. Right? So I'm going to get you to think about the 5NL population now as people that understand much less about the game than you. They might not play worse than you, by the way. They might play better than you, even though they understand less. but they understand way less about the game, and they're much more just instinctive and just reacting to what's going on. That's the way they are, right? They're not thinking on a deep level at all. So
yeah, I think population would bet 50% or something like that, as a bluff size.
that's what the data says the pattern is. So it's not that people can't bluff with this sizing, but it's definitely true that the majority of people who have reached this river with a busted draw, of which there are not that many combos, and are bluffing it, are going to bluff smaller. That's definitely what the data says, and it's what our instincts say as well when we understand the humans that play this game. So it's very important the next time you're in a spot like this, that when you ask you did well with the value side of the question, by the way, like these are the value hands, it's quite coherent. Yeah, good. You could have been a bit more like, it's flushes, but you did well with that. But when it comes to the bluff side, it's very important that you then say, they went all in. That's not normal. And then it's an empirical question. What do we see the population do when they're bluffing here? Not, is there a rationale for going all in? That's not the question. But what do we see empirically? Like you're watching a chimpanzee, in a nature documentary. Oh, it threw its baby against a tree. There was no rationale for it to do that. Like, why did it do that? It can't have done that because that's a silly thing to do. No, but we know chimpanzees do this. They get mad and they do all sorts of like horrific things that a human would hopefully never do, right? And when you look at a 5NL population, I'm not calling all of 5NL chimps, guys. I don't mean to be that rude, but you do have to look at it on a broad scale of what do they do empirically? What do we see? How do they react? Not what specific thought could lead to a conclusion, but just how do they react? Oh, they like to bluff smaller. Because again, Chris, back to you. If I'm gonna rob a gas station, let's say, and I go in there, how am I gonna do it? Am I gonna have a handgun and be like, yeah, money? Or am I gonna do like a parade and have a cannon? Like, what am I gonna do? Am I gonna do a dance with samurai swords? Like, what am I gonna do? I'm probably gonna, just use the gun. Yeah, I'm going to use the easiest, simplest thing. And the easiest, simplest, safest thing for the pool to do here when they're bluffing is to bet half pot. And that's the psychology of it. And you knew that, Vinod. You just weren't asking the right question. So, Vinod, let's summarize this by saying you can answer questions pretty well when you ask the right one, but you ask the wrong question too often, Vinod, right? I think that's what's going on. And that's why you're calling so often.
I think that's fair.
So if I give you a couple of actionable steps for today, then I would say, and I'm going to keep this specific to river. When you're on the river, you've got a chance to call, and it's a bluff catching spot, right?
Mm-hmm.
You beat value, you don't beat bluffs. Ask yourself, are value hands coherent? And that's only one part of the question. That's just the start. And then, how coherent are bluffs here? And when you ask the second question, it is not a rational thought. It's an empirical thought. What that means is it's not, for anyone that's wondering what those isn't familiar with that terminology, it means that it's not about what would make sense to do or what would be logical to do or projecting your own understanding of poker. It's about what you would see from large numbers of 5NL players en masse. What would they do? That makes sense? We're just taking the reason out of it. And we're going to the empirical truth of what we see.
Makes sense.
Cool. I wouldn't rob a gas station with a 70s Tash. Yeah, I'm not saying I'm going to either. I would shave this off if I did, because no one would believe that I was legit. I told you guys, if this gets too much, you tell me, right? We can get rid of it. But at one point in my life, I have to take after my dad and have this facial hair, because otherwise, like, it's not really a true tribute. All right.
Do we put the villain hat here?
We shouldn't care from an analytical standpoint, but curiosity, I guess we care. Chat, what do you think they had? What do you think?
I'm going to say 8x of diamonds. So some diamond flush.
That's it. So the vast majority of the value range here is ace-x of diamonds, and the vast majority of their range is value. Therefore, they probably have ace-x of diamonds. That is very ambitious. Very, very ambitious. And a polarization mistake for that sizing. But it's still not a bluff.
Okay.
Don't think anyone was going to guess that one. Right, one quick hand. You're going to do the river analysis now. You're going to show myself and Chris and everyone at home that you understand your mission statement here. 540 magically appeared in the middle. Look at that. Magically appeared. Isn't it nice when 5.4 big blinds magically falls from the sky into the middle of the pot? That's cool.
This might be one of those splash pots thing they have in coin poker, you know, where they add a bonus sort of a thing, you know.
Okay, so in any case, it looks like you called him in 3-bet here with 5-4 suited. Is that what happened? Yeah. Yeah, you called this so. Like should be illegal min 3-bet. Okay, fine. Don't fold to this one. Villain checks and you bet 4.6 big blinds. I think that's a bit of a polarization mistake with this hand class. Yeah. I don't think you want to bet that big. It's too medium. You get check min raise. What does it mean when you get check min raised by a 3-better? Let's start the analysis here. How coherent is value? How coherent is bluffing with this line? Go ahead and answer it. Start with value.
You want me to say what hands would do it? Would play this way, or
how coherent is it? How much does it make sense for them to have value here? Would it be a common way people might play value?
Yeah, I would say yes.
Yeah.
So when value hands would play. Yeah.
So when fish do this, it's not hard for us to imagine them with ace king or king queen or something, right? Like it's pretty easy just to imagine them with any king. Yep. So there's lots of value that's coherent, that's consistent. That's all I'm asking. It's a very simple question. I don't want you to get lost in the weeds. It's just like, does it make sense for value, or there's some hands that I can attribute to this? Yeah, that they play this way. Yeah.
Yes.
As a bluff, how natural, how coherent, how normal is it for fish to check min raise the flop as their way of bluffing you?
I think it's quite possible, you know. On paired flops, I don't think it's incoherent for bluffs to play this way, or semi bluffs, you know, for two hearts, or you know.
Okay. Yeah. Well, let me give you an argument then, right? So who bluffs in this way then? What kind of player type? What kind of fish?
A maniac, you know.
A maniac. Okay, so give the maniac a bluff. Give them a hand that you think they could be bluffing with. Don't give them a really high equity one, because that doesn't help our cause much. Give them a lower equity one. Not a flush draw, in other words, something else.
It's usually just airball bluffs, you know, not something that connects.
Any hand.
Like pocket six.
7-5 of clubs.
7-5 of clubs. Love it. Right, let's give them 7-5 of clubs. The problem is, Vinod, that they probably just bet the flop with that if they want to bluff. Again, handgun in gas station, not elaborate dance with samurai swords, juggling cannons, right? If you want to bluff, if you're a fish and you want to bluff with 7-5 of clubs, you bet the flop and you try and make your opponent fold. That's generally where that desire takes you. And I'm not saying they can't check raise the bluff, bluff the flop with that hand too, but it's going to happen at a way lower frequency. So this line has value written all over it, because it's very easy to see how a fish could decide to trap and slow play here. It's a very common fish mentality. But if they were maniacal enough to do this with 7-5 of clubs and other hands like that, they'd probably just have bet the flop. That's why you don't see this line as a bluff very often. Not because if you dropped a maniac in this node, they wouldn't want to bluff, but because they've not checked the flop if they're that crazy, if they're that aggressive. Does that make sense?
Sure. I think a maniac profile would go for the check raise. You know, there's the
they wouldn't. They would bet the flop almost always.
Okay.
They would bet the flop. Almost always.
I think what not necessarily maniac players, but I feel like there are a lot of players who kind of get into some sort of like ego battle here, where they just like, I'm just gonna check raise this guy because, like they think you're stabbing like 100% of your hands when you check to them. Or when they check to you, sorry. So then they just start check raising you with like random shit. Sorry, or are we allowed to swear? Sorry.
That's fine. So the problem is,
it's like an ego. Yeah.
So that can happen if it's one, we don't even know this is a maniac and they've min 3-bet pre, so it's probably not a maniac, right?
Just right. It's assuming a lot to think that this is that kind of player.
But hang on a second. Check raising the flop as a pre-flop caller is one thing, right? And then check raising the flop as the pre-flop raiser is another thing. So when you're the pre-flop caller and you're a maniac, you might check all of your range procedurally, because even though you're a maniac, you don't donk bet, right? So you get to the opportunity to check raise the flop with all of your air. But when you are the pre-flop 3-better, you have a very streamlined, easy route to just betting if you're a wild maniac. And that's why they don't check raise as a bluff as pre-flop 3-better. So we're conflating two different nodes there, Chris, I think. I see what you're saying. One, we don't know it's a maniac, and two, that would only hold if they've range checked the flop. So what I'm saying, Vinod, is you are prescribing a really aggressive and really unusual mentality to your opponent there. Most people just bet when they're aggressive and they miss the flop. They don't check raise as pre-flop raiser. That's what I'm saying to you. And if you want to continue believing that it can happen, you're right to, it can happen. But if you want to then call the check raise just because it can happen, that's where we have a problem, Vinod, right? Because it doesn't happen often enough. And it's okay to be bluffed by that rare person that does this.
Yep.
Cool. Right, let's move on to Chris's database in a second here. So,
oh boy.
Yeah, so let's just finish with one thought. Check, raise, bet. Vinod, over to you. How coherent a line for value hands is that? We said it was normal for them to check, raise the flop. Is it also normal for them to bet the turn in the river if they've got ace king here? Is that coherent? Is that normal?
Yeah, it is.
Okay,
yeah,
I agree.
Consistent with the value. Yeah.
Not a convoluted thing, not a weird thing, just a normal thing to do if you've got value. And if you're bluffing and you have check raised the flop as pre-flop raiser, you then bet turn and shove river. Okay, you could do that, but that's two chances to just give up on the bluff that they've not taken. So these continuous lines, you need them to be jumping through lots of hoops here, right? You need them to be not just check raising the flop, but also continuing on the turn and the river. And they could. You could construct an argument where it's like, yeah, you can see that happening. Problem is, it just doesn't happen often enough, right? Mm-hmm. And you need to challenge your prior beliefs about about where people could bluff, and you need to be willing to let it go even though they could be bluffing. So two things. Ask about the value first, then ask about the bluffs, and then come to an honest conclusion. And don't let the thought of they could be bluffing, I could see what thought might lead to the bluff. That's not enough. You need to ask, what would I see if I looked at this a million times? That's a great way to snap yourself out of that. If I looked at this hand a million times, how many bluffs would I see? I think you'd see like 3% of the time it would be a bluff by the river. Yep.
Yeah. Do you have any comment about the river jam size? You know, imagine I have king 4 suited here. You know, even king 4 suited sort of becomes a bluff catcher. You know, to this sizing, right?
King 4.
Sorry. King 4 would be a full house. Imagine like king 6 suited, you know.
Yep.
Like trips, you know, but it's a 2x jam, you know, it still becomes a bluff catcher. Mm-hmm. So if I did call over there, I think that might be sort of the thought, you know, that he's so polarized, you know, it's either air or, you know.
Yep. So if you have king 6 suited, you have a bluff catcher. I agree. You don't beat value. You beat bluff.
Right.
Only.
Right.
Should you now call because you have a king?
That's the question, yeah.
So what do you think?
I think the answer is no. You know, because they're not bluffing often enough. You know, in this line, unless it's just some kind of. I mean, I can't even imagine a worse king playing that way.
Yeah, and even if you could, it would still be a tiny part of range. Even if it was possible that you could beat some value, if the spot was really under bluffed, it would still be a fold if you only beat a little bit of value.
Right.
It would still be a fold. So king 6 is a trivial fold here too in terms of EV. In that if you call, you lose a lot of EV. It's better than 5-4. Like you lose less EV if you call with king 6 than if you call with 5-4. And that's because of removal. You're going to remove some full house and top trips combinations. But because villain is almost never bluffing, you still lose the vast majority of the time. So if you imagine, like when you make this river call, I think you lose like 95% of the time, quite honestly. I think this is a never win spot. And if you have king 6, I think you lose 91% of the time. Something like that.
Okay.
Yep. You need a bolt to call here or ace king. If you have ace king, it gets interesting. You know, king queen. Now you can start to say, well, are they doing this with lots of other king X? And like where the exact threshold is there where you no longer have a bluff catcher and you're beating loads of value. I don't know. It might be ace king. It might be king queen, but it's certainly not king 6 or king 7 or anything like that. It's probably ace king plus.
Is it a profitable bluff catch with ace king?
It's not a bluff catch with ace king because you're now beating value. You can see why king jack king queen would play this way, and you chop with ace king.
Okay.
But I think it's fine with ace king. Yeah, I think you chop or win enough for sure.
Okay.
Yep. Sam says we need the fishes VPIP PFR to know whether to fold the king here. Yeah, but you can still predict against population. I'm still folding a king against this fish line as a general population, even though some maniacs, it might be a call against them. I don't think there's enough of them. You don't have the stats, you infer from general pop, right? But
can you quickly see what Willin had here?
The one combo of 4s this time, but let's not take anything from that.
Yep.
If Villain had 7-6 of hearts here, I still hate the call, right? So that's important for you to not use these results as any kind of verification. Right, Chris, over to you now. So that's your mission, Vinod, right? Ask about value, ask about bluffs, and then ask empirically how often it's bluffed over a large sample. Don't construct reasons, rationale, explanations of how they could be bluffing. That's why you're making too many bad calls. Right, let's move on to Chris. So Chris, tell us a bit about yourself. I didn't get to check in with you properly last week, so tell me a bit more about you just now.
Yeah, so I've been playing poker since I started a couple years before the pandemic. I've done, I don't know, just a lot of like random training, like YouTube videos and edutainment kind of content. I read the Grinders Manual back when I was like first starting out, and I think that helped me a lot. And the reason I got into the Silver Carrot was because I actually went back and started rereading it, and I was like, I should get like the most like up to date version of this information. So I went to your training, and now I'm here. Other than that, I've used Upswing. That was one of the first like training courses I went through. But a lot of their content was very kind of disorganized and stuff. So yeah, I've played a lot live. I've played a lot online. I used to play on Ignition, and now I play on Coin Poker. Yeah, that's pretty much it. As far as how far I've gotten into the Silver Carrot, I've watched all of Grade 1. I felt like the concepts made sense. Although I do want to go back and kind of rewatch it a bit just to make sure it's all like solidified. I watched Cash Injection, and I feel like by the point I got to Cash Injection, my brain was kind of like fatigued from going through Grade 1, so none of it stuck. I need to go back and rewatch it.
Yep.
Right now I'm going through True EV, and I'm up to the River Accuracy episodes.
Cool. Yeah. So we have a 3-part thing in Silver Carrot. So just for anyone that's just joining us, this is the Silver Carrot Lab. So it's taking people that have Silver Carrot and have committed to that and trying to show them a more practical take. So while they're working through our theory and all of our courses, we're showing them what's actually going wrong, what's the biggest problem in their game, and we're trying to diagnose that and fix that and give them a better thought process. That's what we're doing here in these coaching calls. Silver Carrot is a 3-part thing. The biggest, most important part of it's theory. That's Grade 1 of the Carrot Poker School, which is an 11 video course with an exam, and it's just a very deep theory course. Then there's an exploit course called Cash Injection that shows you like some spots where you can gain some EV by deviating from that theory. And then there's True EV, which is about the final decision. And that gels with what we believe is right at Carrot Corner, which is theory, population, action. Eventually, that's what you'll be doing, right? You'll be thinking, what goes here in theory? We didn't do that in the last few hands with Vinod because those hands were like insanely non-standard hands, and theory was kind of out the window. We went kind of straight to the exploit part. We skipped a step. We do that sometimes. And then we have action. And we always want those 3 steps to be in some way present. And that's why we teach in that way, in that silver pathway. So, Chris, you're here today not to test what you remember out of that content or anything. That's not what we're going to do. I appreciate it takes a lot of time. You want to go back over it. You know, you want to make sure that you're studying in that serious way where it's not learn-tainment. We're here today to see what's actually happening when you click buttons at the table and give you an actionable step for that side of things while you're working through our content. Because we understand that studying poker and then clicking the right buttons, it's just so far from a causal relationship there. There's such a huge gulf there that has to be bridged, right, between like watching and studying and then clicking the right buttons at the right time. Cool. So this is your graph. Initially,
it's a lot of different stakes. Yeah.
Sure.
There's 10 NL, 25 NL. The crash at the end is I poked my head into 50 NL and got slapped. So
okay.
Yeah.
Pick a stake that you currently can't beat or there's no evidence that you can beat, and
25 NL. 25 NL is
play that stake for the long term. Put in a couple of 100,000 hands at it if need be. Okay, maybe not that if you do start soaring and crushing, you can move up sooner, of course, but pick a stake and just use it as your training ground and don't worry about like ultimately what stake you'll be playing. A few years from now, hopefully you're playing way higher. It doesn't matter. You just pick a stake for this year and you just like cut your teeth at it and try and destroy it eventually, right? But don't rush it.
Yeah.
So let's just say start with the 10 NL, just 25,000 hands at that, right? So I'm just going to go there because it's a bit stable to look at. So we have a volatile red and blue line, but we don't have like a very clear pattern. We have a bit of a losing red line, but it's actually quite flat. It's not that losing. And we have a slightly winning blue line that's not that winning. So we effectively have 3 break-even lines here. That's what we're looking at almost, but the red line is almost normal. It's a bit less plummeting than most people's red line, but it's definitely in the realms of normal. So given that this is a jagged graph where the blue line's struggling at a lot of points here, I'm going to guess that your leaks are a bit more blue than they are green. Green leaks, by the way, are being too tight, being too nitty, not winning enough pots. I think that this is a less extreme case than all of the students we've looked at so far, who on the show have all had like kind of crazy distributions or like extreme distributions. I think yours is a bit more standard. I'm going to guess that blue leaks calling in bad spots is probably still the primary color of leak, but I don't know, I could be wrong on that. This one's less clear cut. What do you think out of red, blue, and green leaks? Like, what one resonates more with you?
So my 10 NL, I played a couple months ago. So it's like the oldest, the oldest sample. Back then, I think I was playing really terribly in 3 and 4 bet pots.
Right.
And in June, I kind of focused on studying that spot.
Okay.
Right now, I think my river play is terrible. I have a lot of terrible river calls, a lot of awful river bluffs.
Okay. So a bit of red and a bit of blue, basically, but more investment leaks than non-investment leaks. So I'm at least in the right sort of ballpark there. Okay.
I think so, yeah.
So if we look at the 50 NL, I know you've not played maybe 25
50 NL was a train wreck. I don't want to talk about it.
Okay, let's talk about
25 NL, yeah.
Because it's more recent, and this confirms what I was thinking, right? You've actually got a close to flat red line here and a plummeting blue line, which is very much like a blue and red leak problem. This is a purple leak problem, right? Where it's like too many bad bluffs, too many bad calls. You can tell the difference between this and Vinod's graph is that when in Vinod's case, because it was so smoothly, the red line was going up so smoothly, that was a complete lack of folding. That was just basically saying, I'm not going to fold in many spots at all. That's what was causing that. Because yours is more jagged, there is folding, there's more folding going on here. You're not going to have as high a win to showdown stat. But there's a lot of volatility, so there are bluffs being made at the wrong moment. There's probably bad value bets, just bad bets being made here and bad calls being made. That's what this looks like. But definitely there is more folding. It's not just it's not as stationary. It's not as blue. It's more purple. I think what's going on here, just bad investments across the board. That's my diagnosis. Okay, let's look at the stats and see if they corroborate. I won't spend too much time on stats. And we have, oh, that's a hand report. Let's jump into the player report here. Silver Lab player. Okay, and yeah, so we have a higher AF, which means that you're not pressing the call button as often as Vinod was. Your win to showdown's a bit high, but it's not that high. Your one-win soft-flop is quite high. Your bet stats are not that high either. Yeah, like you have mainly blue leaks, but I think it's more situational. It's not like everywhere, but it's definitely in like the key moments. That's what creates the jaggedness, right? It's like in a moment that matters when that pot's big, there's something going wrong there in both red line and blue line. I wouldn't be too shy about actually making a prediction at this point. I think your game falls apart more when pots get big and the pressure's on. I think you play much better in small pots than big pots. I feel like I'm a psychic right now. Is that right? Did your grandmother have 2 sisters? Yeah, one of them's coming through for me right now, man. Yeah, I feel like I'm doing that a bit right now. I'm like reading your body language, but is that kind of right? Like that you agree with that? Or?
That's how I feel. Yeah. Okay. I think I do get attached to large pots, and I end up making just like ego plays and stuff. Like I said, I make a lot of really punty bluffs in spots where my opponents just aren't folding. And that's kind of what I've been focusing my recent study on, is like river spots, and trying to. I feel like I can correctly predict what my like theory bluffs should be, but I can't predict, or I can't identify whether a spot is undercalled or overcalled by the population. And so I end up making like a correct bluff in a spot where exploitively I should never be bluffing.
Yeah.
And then it's a punt. And then
all right.
Yeah.
Let's start with red and say river bets, any river bet, and add that to the filter for now. And then I'll maybe look at a couple of calls as well. But I think it's both. I think it's just like investments in general. It's purple leaks, right? So I think you could look at one of each here. I don't know that there's a clear front runner. And let's see. Let's take an example of one such bluff, right? Just to start off here. So, 1 second, let's share the right window. This mouse is so incredibly hard to use, guys. Maybe I'm not really left-handed. Maybe I'm just no-handed. All right. So we have ace queen. Start with this. We've anteed 16 cents because why not?
Yeah, all the coin poker, once you get above 25, like 25 and 0 and up, is all ante games, which I don't really know how to adjust that pre-flop, so I'm kind of flying blind there. I know I have to play looser, but I don't know how much looser. So
cool. Quick question there from a couple of people. Forever 1984, absolutely, you can share what you've made, like your notes and stuff. We could actually, if it's really good, we could get ChatGPT to put it into visuals, and we could put it as like the handout for the course or something. I'm happy to take a look. Yeah, why not? Hit me up in Discord. Carrots9127, carrots with a Z, that is. Dirt Sniff says, I think you should make a video of different people's graphs and explain the red line, blue line, green line mistakes. Yeah, again, it's not really like they correlate with the lines. It's just like red mistakes, blue mistakes, green mistakes. We actually do that in the starter kit at Carrot Corner. It's free. It's not on YouTube, but it is free. And you just have to head over to the link in the description for this stream to get a free starter kit and actually have your primary color diagnosed. You can get that for free by going over to Carrot Corner after the show. Or now if you want. You want to multi-table the content here. So it will ask you to put in like an email address and a name. That's it. There's no details or anything. It's a free product. So 2.2 big blinds and a 3-bet and a call. Let's not talk too much about pre-flop. So yeah, purple leaks. So this is basically the bottom of range, right? It's like the worst thing you can have.
Yeah.
And so if you, a good rule is that if you ever face a small c-bet and you have the bottom of your range, you can fold. You can fold the absolute bottom of your range in any spot to any c-bet. So it's okay to just let this go here. And that's the most normal thing to do.
I was about to say, I wonder if I raise here. Yeah.
Well, cash injection, right? People do c-bet too much on this board. And they do c-bet small, but this board is not like that low. It's not like this board is 6-5-4 and they just have a ton of air. They actually connect with this board pretty hard. It's high enough that they still connect pretty hard with this. It's such a messy board that it's going to be kind of rare that they have an absolute whiff, especially when your cards are the Ace of Diamonds and the Queen of Hearts, right? Removing a lot of their absolute whiffs. So I think this is not the spot to use the cash injection small raise in the 3-bet pot. The board is too wet, and it might be a board that they don't bet range on, like sometimes. And even if they are betting range, they'll still have a lot of really natural continues on this board. The spot to sort of go for the eyes closed, you know, screw you, min raise, click it back, is like when they do it on 7-5-3 or something, and you just have 2 overs, because now your outs are actually really pristine. Like, say you have Jack 10 of spades and the flop is like 7-5-3, right? And you just click it back. And not only are they going to fold a ton already there because they just miss more. But when they do call you with ace king high or something, which they will sometimes, you can hit a jack or a 10 and still have quite a good hand. Or when they call you with nines, you can hit a jack or a 10. Here, the quality of the ace and the queen are very bad, and they have less absolute whiffs here. So I think that's the difference, right? So I'm kind of treating you, Chris, like you do have a decent amount of theory. You do kind of know what you're doing. It's just application that's not honed yet. And so I'm turning this call into an application, reining in the bad aggression and reining in the bad calls sort of thing exercise. So this one just a bit far.
Okay.
When
just to comment like on my
Go for it.
on my thought process. So I think what I was thinking, and trying to mind read myself. I have sevens, eights, jacks, nines, club draws and stuff, and so the difference on like 7-5-3 is that I still have like threes, fives, sevens, but here my opponent kind of shares those sets and etc. Whereas on 7-5-3, I kind of uniquely have those sets because he's probably not. It's probably not three betting like three.
That's like saying, the movie takes place in the countryside as opposed to like the city. Like it means certain things, but it doesn't change what actually happens if one guy has a gun and the other guy has a pencil. It doesn't really matter what the backdrop is. Like if it's the case that humans are just not overfolding here, because their range is too strong, because they connect with this board too much, and you don't have enough compensatory equity, it doesn't matter that you have loads of value here. You're not going to make this population fold kings because you have all that value. They're going to fold ace king, but like who cares? That's not enough of their range, right, in this spot. So you're using a contextual framing of like, this is a spot where your range is doing very well. It's a sort of bird's eye view, zoomed out theoretical concept. It's a very general theoretical concept, right? That like you have a lot of nutted hands here. That doesn't just give you loads of fold equity. It doesn't.
Okay.
And in fact, this is a very underfolded spot later on in the hand, for the simple reason that people are very bad at reacting to that kind of thing. Your opponents are not using this rationalizing. It's the same as Vinod, right? He's doing the same thing you're doing, where like you're prescribing a line of reasoning to your opponent. It only matters that you can have 10-9 suited in your range if your opponent reacts to the fact that you can have 10-9 suited in your range. So if your opponent handles kings here, the same when they face a raise and a bet here, as they would on 8-3-3, then it doesn't really matter that you have those extra value hands. So I'm not saying it's exactly the same, but the population is underreacting to texture and line. They're not good at finding overfolds, and they are just playing their absolute hand strength too much. And that means that when you filter them on the flop and cause them to bet call on a wet board like this, they're now going to be grossly underfolding the turn. The turn is a very underfolded spot now because of that. And it doesn't matter that you can have more sets than them. That doesn't give you the fold equity you need to bluff the turn with nothing.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
So what I want you to do, your mission is start with theory if you want, but theory still doesn't justify this hand, by the way, as a raise. Theory knows that you've got all these extra sets and stuff. It still doesn't justify raising this hand on flop. It's still probably not okay. And it's definitely not okay on turn. Start with theory.
No, turn is spew. Turn is spew. Right. Yeah.
And then do your exploit. Do it in 2 clear steps. And it's like, flop, is that overfolded? Not so much on this texture. And then turn, is that overfolded? No, it's the opposite. It's underfolded. And that's how we avoid like bluffing a hand that's not a theory bluff in an underfolded node, right? That's how we avoid that, is just going step by step. Yep, underfolded spot. They should be folding over pairs now at a decent frequency. They're deep. It's going to be underfolded. Does it make sense to you why the population, why that happens? Like why the 5NL population underfolds here? Does that make sense? Or are you sitting there thinking, but I would fold there. Shouldn't they fold there? Like, does it make sense why they underfold?
No, I think I just have a hard time putting myself into their mind.
Right.
And like, I guess, yeah, I probably am projecting a bit, because like calling kings or queens or even aces here just like seems ridiculous.
Yeah, it is ridiculous, but you've got to remember who the average 5NL player is. It's not a studied player. It's usually not an experienced player. it's usually someone who likes poker, enjoys playing, but isn't very skilled at all. And then what did they see? Did they see ranges? Did they know what a bluff catcher is? Did they know what underbluffed, overbluffed means? Maybe they do, and they still can't apply it. Like, Vinod knows what that means, and he's still calling all these river spots, right? Right, Vinod, you know what a bluff catcher is. You know what underbluffed, overbluffed is, but still you're calling in bad spots. So even a player with better theory than the population like Vinod is still capable of calling in way too many spots, right? So then you think about the rest of the population, and they're not the serious reg. They're just clicking buttons. So if the serious regs are still making these mistakes sometimes, good luck. Because most people are just looking at two kings. I know that sounds very caveman, but it's true. There you go, two kings. That was poetic. I didn't know he had two kings, guys, but there you go. Not surprised. No one should be surprised that Villain called there. If you're reacting to that, guys, same for you at home watching this, by going, that's absurd that he called with kings in that spot. Why would he do that? That makes no sense. Surely that's a fold. That's the wrong reaction. The right reaction is, that is in line with 5NL population data. That's the right reaction, because you're thinking about population, the step before action. Theory? Kings is a bluff catcher. It's indifferent. Maybe it's a fold due to blockers, maybe not. It's not going to matter much. Population? They should fold if you're Villain, but from our point of view, it's underfolded. We need to just look from our point of view, what are they doing? So if we're the big blind here, what's the cutoff doing? What do we see empirically? If we're the cutoff here, what's the big blind doing? What do we see empirically over big samples? That's all that matters. Any questions on that, Chris?
No.
So
that makes sense.
Try to identify the point where the population of chimpanzees is no longer letting go of their hand. Try to identify that point and back off for now. Or not letting go of their hand enough, I should say. Right, we'll do one more, then we're going to review Samantha's game. So I think that's a good enough example of like a bluff, right, that goes wrong. You bluff in bad spots because you care too much about range advantage, what should happen, projecting higher level thoughts, and you don't do enough like putting... You don't need to put yourself in the population's shoes. You just need to look at what they're doing empirically and say that's what they're doing and see who they are clearly. That's what you don't do enough of. All right, now we're going to go to calls. I'm going to change the filter here. Get in your hand, one sec.
Oh, Pete, if you're talking... Oh.
Sorry,
can you guys hear
muted.
me?
Yeah, I was muted.
Okay. I thought I was... yeah.
Thank you. Good spot. So we call this turn probe with open cutoff, big blinds called. If you guys didn't catch that when I was muted there, we check back on the flop, which is fine, and then we call the turn late here, which is also fine. And then the river comes a six of hearts and a bet half pot, and this is another spot where we're going to need to figure out our equity at this moment in time and then reassess it when this happens. Okay, this is a very small raise. It's not as good a hand as I thought it would be.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, right, let's be super frank and honest here. If Villain shoved, they have a value range that beats our hand, right? Clearly. And they're grossly under bluffing, right? There's no way anybody ever bluffs there, and we should definitely fold our hand, right, against a jam. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Hopefully I would find that in game. In game, I might honestly call a jam.
Most people don't find the fold in game, so most players at your stakes don't find that fold because they have the nut flush, and that's what I mean. They're not thinking about the opponent's. Maybe they have a suspicion about the opponent's range, but ultimately it's their absolute hand strength, their hand label that's making the decision. That's what happens in a blue league. The hand label makes the decision for you. The attachment makes the decision. So against this, let's now think about what villain's range is. How often is this worse value? How often is this a king high flush, a queen high flush, a jack high flush, do you think?
Queen and jack never. King, I mean, it's so small.
Yeah, but
maybe
you've just
40% of the time.
Right, so he's bet half pot and you've just raised, right? On a paired 4 flush board. So if you have a king high flush, let's be super honest here, and you're just a random poker player with a king high flush, how many people in that position decide, oh, do you know what? I still think I'm good here. I'm going to go for a value 3-bet. Let's be honest about this. How many people have that thought?
I'm guessing the answer you're looking for is very few.
I want you to be honest about it, right? If you're a human, well, we need to get you better at judging that. You need to try and judge that. If you're a human being...
Okay, my judgment's going to be never then. Like, never.
I think it's close to never, yeah. I think for every one person who decides to 3-bet a king high flush on the river, there are 80 to 90 who just call. I would say that's not an exaggeration here. I think this is like just very, very weird. A very weird thing to do. So I think you still have a bluff catcher. For all intents and purposes, I think villain is repping a boat. Even with that sizing. And I know you guys don't like this, and no one will ever fold here. And you might even get mad at me for saying this is a fold, but this is a fold in my mind. If we're being honest about this, and we're putting our queasiness about pot odds aside, you're not going to win 18% of the time here, because the opponent will never be bluffing, or at least it'll be like single, not just single digits, but like low single digits, right? And then we just reasoned that the king high flush does this almost never. So, unless this is an absolute known maniac, which will increase... By the way, they'll still have a boat a lot, but it will increase the chances that they have a worse flush, or just goofing around. But if it's a known normal player, let's say, I think you win 1 or 2% of the time here. If it's a random fish, I think you win a bit more, but I still don't think it's 18%. And if it's an absolute maniac, then I think you win more than 18%. But I think it's only a call against the sort of known aggro fish maniac. Like, recreational. I think it's a fold. But no one will ever fold here. I won't even fold here. Like, it's impossible, right, as a human, but it's actually a fold if you break it down rationally. So if you can fold in this spot, you would cure all of your blue leaks. Because a man that can fold in this spot is a man, Chris, who can fold in any spot. Right?
I like that. Yeah.
Right. Let's move on. I think that turned out to be quite a good example. But yeah, it's just like, it's such low-hanging fruit, guys, to fix your blue leaks. If you're watching this at home and you're like, I call all these spots where villain's line tells me I've almost certainly lost, but my hand looks too good to fold. That's the problem. Don't look any further. Take our starter kit and fix that first. And does 3 combos of straight flushes. There you go. I just had this happen. I didn't fold. You're not alone, faithful. Almost no one folds here. This is a fold. You have to say, nut flush? No thanks. 18% pot odds, nut flush? No thank you. You've always got me beat. No thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, that's insane. But I mean, your reasoning makes sense. But yeah, that's crazy.
It is a fold. It is 100% objectively a fold, guys. We just cope. We have a cope mechanism saying you can't fold here. Anyway, let's go on to Samantha because I don't want to not get to her game. So go away and start asking yourself, do they overfold or underfold here? And think about how filtered they are and how good their hand label is. Right? That's what I want you to think about. And don't bluff them when they've filtered and the hand label is quite good. That's it. Simple fix. And in these spots, do I have a bluff catcher? If so, yeah. If so, ask. how often are they bluffing the spot compared to value? And here, there's loads of value combos. They have a boat. You can see some boats, and they have almost no frequency of ever choosing to bluff this spot. And you just have to work on that thought process, just being brutally honest and objective about it. Okay, let's move on. All right, Samantha, hello. Tell me a bit about, I know we've met before, but tell the audience a little bit about you, and then we'll get into your database here.
Hey, Pete, can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. Hey, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. So yeah, I've been following the YouTube stream passively while still at work. Don't tell my boss. But yeah, hearing other people's backgrounds, I think I'm like the rookiest of the rookies here. So I literally started my second phase, if you will, of poker towards the end of June this year. Played a little bit before, dabbled online and live cash games, but never really took it seriously. It was more of a, hey, let's play cards and see what happens kind of mentality. Right. And starting this June is when I actually thought maybe I will just give it a try, and came across various courses. Decided to go with CPS, and here we are. Mistakes and errors and misfires and whatnot.
Okay. So this graph is probably the first one we've seen on this show so far that the red line is more typical of a player that plays lower micro stakes. It's going down, the blue line is going up, and the green line is breaking even. This is a very likely graph for a subset of random players playing, you know, as rookies, as you say. This is what their graph diverges to most frequently. The reason for that is that it's very intuitive to fold when you have a bad hand and check when you have a bad hand for most people and bet when you have a good hand. And there's nothing wrong with that as a starting point. The most likely leaks you have are green leaks, Samantha, and I want to look at green leaks today. I'm not saying you don't have blue leaks and red leaks, you do. And you've told me about those. I think in our Discord chat, you mentioned a time when you're making sort of stubborn calls, defiant calls, not wanting to let go of aces and things like that. Would you be okay if we focused on the green leaks today? And the reason I say that is that we've just seen blue leaks in the game of Vinod, the game of Chris. We saw some blue leaks last time as well. Why don't we look at green leaks and see where we can harvest some extra money today?
Yeah, absolutely. Just blast away.
So let's go to the report, and we'll just see, we should expect to see a completely different configuration of stats here than in the other students' games. So let's go Silver Lab report. But yeah, it's not a bad start. There's nothing deeply problematic in the graph there. Like, it's a solid foundation to build on. You're doing grade 1. It's a decent spot to be in. Like, you don't have a debilitating leak that's making it totally impossible for you to win yet. Okay, you are too tight, but we can build that up. So what I'm seeing here is the game is too tight, passive, in direction, right? So the AF is 1.23, which is extremely checky, cally. There's not enough betting going on. 1-1 soft flop is 46. That's much lower than the 1-1 soft flop stats we've just looked at. Raise flop c-bet, that's not yet a part of your game unless you've got the nuts. It's 3.64. It's just something that needs to be developed theoretically and exploitatively. C-bet, flop, turn, and river, they're not that low actually, but pre-flop we're missing some opportunities. We're running pre-flop stats at 18, 11, 5 here, where we're just not getting involved enough. And while that is honestly not a terrible thing in a high rate game when we're not that experienced yet, we are leaking a decent amount of money from not getting involved too much at this point. So green leaks are absolutely the thing to focus on, even though, as I say, you might have blue leaks in your game sometimes. You definitely don't have red leaks. It's not that you're making loads of bad bluffs, I don't think. You might be making polarization errors in some spots, but you're definitely more on the linear, not investing enough side at the moment, Samantha, right? So let's move on to some hands, and we're going to actually look at checks, right? So with red leaks, we look at bets. Blue ones, we look at calls. Green leaks, we look at checks and folds. I want to look at both of those. They're both important, so we'll try and do both here. The filter I'm going to put on is start with checked river, and we're going to see which river checks are not okay. But when we're doing this, I'm going to show actually here the filter window for a second, if I can find it. Hash filters. Okay. So if we look at this for a second here. When you're filtering for non-investment and you're looking at checks, you want to rule out procedural checks, right? You don't want to look at times when you called the turn, you're just checking the river to the aggressor. So you're meant to check there, or at least it's not that bad if you do. So what I'm going to say is that you check the river, turn that on, and add it to the filter. And then we want to say that it's not the case that you had a donk opportunity, right? So it's not that you checked in a donk opportunity. So we go to the river again, and we go to opportunities, and we go donk bet opportunity, add to filter, and we say not true. And now we have genuine river checks in this spot. Okay, so let me pull up the hands now. Give me 1 sec while I get these on screen. And there will be missed value bets and missed bluffs in this filter. And we're going to talk about each of them separately. That's the last hand. King 10. That's what I want. Okay. So let's start with just a common preflop situation like this one then. There's no street that's too common or simple or boring to talk about. This is a fascinating spot. Do you consider raising here? And if so, why do you not raise? What puts you off?
So the way I'm trying to approach the game these days, I would definitely raise here if I was entering, and I would enter here with King 10 offsuit. And just a quick segue back to the stats. I think I mentioned that post July 20th is when I started focusing actively on the nittiness that I started the game with. So these days, yes, I would definitely raise King 10 here, but I'm not really sure when this hand is from. And sometimes, given the action around the table, I might just consider limping if there was like 1 or 2 other callers in front of me, because a lot of times in NL25, raising to 2.5 when you have like 2 or 3 callers in front of you just inflates the pot and kind of drives you away from the pot when you're when you're squeezed by 3, 4, and 5 bets.
Yeah, so you're getting a bit ahead of yourself there. You're not wrong though. The reason that you don't want to raise weak hands after 3 limpers is that you just don't thin the field enough. You just don't get the fold equity that you want, right? And you end up paying more with a kind of bad hand to then have to play fair or fold, right? The getting 3-bet and stuff is a bit more of a rare occurrence, but it's just simply that there are 2 currencies that you kind of need to be in your favor in order for you to put money into the pot in poker. You either need to have equity, which is the one that's matched up to value betting, or you need to have fold equity, which is the concept that's associated with bluffing. And if you have a bad hand like King 10 offsuit, you have 3 limpers, you have low fold equity and not that much equity either. So you might just limp along, you might even fold, right? But here, because you have just 1 limper, you have better equity now because you're going to be heads up a lot if you ISO, if you raise, and you want to go bigger, by the way, than like 2.5 or 3. That's an open size. You want to ISO to like 4, 4.5. A bit awkward here with a small blind, but let's ignore that. It's not that relevant. And so you have more equity because you're just going to be against 1 opponent. And you have more fold equity because you're just going to be against 1 opponent. And then it makes sense to play the hand, right? So just remember that pre-flop. Equity and fold equity are the things you want.
Okay.
So we raise, we call the flop here. The cutoff then bets the turn for just under half pot. What do you think about this situation? Do you think it's better to call here or raise here, and why?
I mean, given that we have the nut straight here, I think we have a case to raise here.
Mm-hmm. So if we cast our minds back to grade 1, lecture 2 on value betting, value bets can either be optional, mandatory, or prohibited, right? So that's to say, like, if it's prohibited, you don't have enough equity to do it, you shouldn't value raise. If it's optional, you've got enough equity to do it, but you might not need to. It's not urgent enough. And if it's mandatory, then you've got enough equity to do it, and it's urgent that you put money in that way. So do you think this is just optional, that you could make this raise, or do you think it's necessary that you make this raise?
I would think this falls in the category of hands that is a big hand and needs to build a big pot.
Yeah, that's urgency, right? Which is one of the core concepts of grade 1. Mm-hmm. And what makes it urgent, do you think? There's the hand strength that you mentioned, but is there something else about this situation that makes you need to build a big pot now?
I mean, looking at the small blinds, the cutoffs, stack sizes here, and the fact that we're in position, I would say we have a very good case to actually raise and build a pot up.
Yeah, so it's more about the stacked pot ratio, the fact that the cutoff has all this money behind, and so do we, and there's only going to be 20 odd big blinds in the middle if we call, right? So that increases urgency. It means that there's pot building to do to bring the rest of the stack into play on the river. The other thing that's a bit more advanced is the shape of their range. Like, are they more polar or are they more merged? Do you know what those terms mean, polar and merged, or do you want me to explain?
I do have a rough idea. I've been going through the CBS lessons and kind of revisiting lectures 1 and 2.
Okay.
Polar, I would say the range veers towards the edges, like top value hands and or bluffs.
Yep.
And linear would be where, I mean, at least the way I've given to understand myself is the ranges typically follow a sort of positional pattern, if you will.
Right.
So like from top down, depending on where the position lies on the table. So that's the way I've...
That's a description of a pre-flop range, right? So here it's not, you shouldn't think about it in that kind of chart because we're not pre-flop, we're on the turn. And so it's more about hand strength. And a merged range or linear range, like they're a little bit different, but let's use them synonymously just for now, is one where the equity of the hand can be medium to good to very good, but it definitely contains a bunch of like medium good hands and less air, right? So if polar is really good or bluffs, merged is medium equity, high equity, very high equity, a lot of stuff in between, right? It's more of a continuous block of hands that contains middling stuff rather than this extremities thing that you described. So
okay,
if villain is polar, it means that they have more very big hands that we can stack on the river anyway here, and bluffs that we want to allow to keep bluffing. And it makes sense to slow play more against polar ranges, call more, allow them to bluff, value bet against them later. But when villain is more merged or linear, meaning they have like quite good hands a lot and draws a lot, they're both merged types of hands, by the way. A flush draw here is not nothing, it's not air, it doesn't make sense to call that like fully polarized. It's a medium strength hand. If villain has queen 10 here, they have a pair and a draw, they have a very medium to good hand. And against those hands, they're likely to check the river, they're not likely to put loads more money in, and they are likely to call raises. So against those hands, you want to fast play, and you want to rush your values. This is a very urgent spot, and it's a mandatory raise, and it's very important to pot build here in future. And we do raise, which is good. Villain then checks the ace of spades river. This is where we need to be hand reading, right? So what do you think their range looks like? What kinds of hands are going to be in there? And how high do we think our equity is here? Let's go into like the grade 1 Cart Poker School language. Can we value bet the river here? How good is our equity?
In retrospect, I probably should have. And when I saw that ace fall on the river, my brain was biased towards assuming the worst, which is, you know, a flush draw getting there. So that's the reason why I think I went back and actually checked. But in terms of equity, I think we are at least I want to say 60 to 70%,
Okay. So,
given how the action progressed.
so I like that you're estimating in percentages like that, and I like that you're being quite vague about it. Like, that's good. Just estimating percentage equity is a great way to think about the game. If you did have 60% equity, the river would be a check. I want to be really clear about this because villain doesn't always call your bet. So if you only started with 60% and they folded some of their range, right, to your river bet, you would then be an underdog if they actually called. So 60 wouldn't be enough to value bet the river. But I think the amount of flushes your opponent has here is very few and far between. They remember the ace and queen of spades are out, so they can't have those cards. It would have to be some sort of king high flush, but then, or jack high flush. And a king high flush, well, they bet the flop into 3 people. And then, yeah, they could bet the turn with king 4 of spades, but do they bet the flop into 3 opponents with king 4 of spades? Most people don't, right? Most people don't do that. So do they bet big with a jack? Most people don't do that either. So it's looking like the actual flushes they could have here are not likely hands for villain to reach the river with, and there aren't that many of them. And what that does is it puts your equity way higher than 60 to 70%. I'm thinking 80 to 90 comfortably. And if you have 85% equity, you can make a big bet here. You can maybe go all in, you can go a bit smaller, but we definitely want to be betting the river. And it's normal to be blinded visually by things because humans are visual creatures. And when we see the 3rd spade, it's suddenly very vivid to us how we can lose this hand, right? That becomes very vivid and we don't want that to happen because that hurts. Let's face it, that hurts. But actually,
I think it was one of your videos that, sorry, I was saying, I think it was one of your videos that actually talked about the improbability of flushes actually accruing by the river versus any other type of draw, and why it is so wrong for you to be biased to think that your opponent has made a flush. So I'm trying to keep that in mind and not always assume the worst. And
yeah. What will really help is actually, like, I think what's happened in the hand here is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think you've done much hand reading. I think you've been more thinking, I have the nuts, do I need to raise? Yes, I think I need to raise. What's a good sizing? And that's a lot, so that can occupy like full bandwidth a lot of the time, right? And then it's a big stretch to then say, and I need to put my opponent on a range of hands while I'm doing all of this. But that's why thinking in range shapes is so valuable. They've bet small and bet called a turn, so they're merged. They're condensed. They have medium hands a lot. What's a medium hand here? Could be 2 spades, but more likely it's like 2 pair, top pair, that kind of thing. So on the river, it's way more likely your opponent has 2 pair than it is that they have a flush. And while 2 pair is a really trivial fold here, if they're actually playing well against your line in a 4-way pot, you're playing against players with blue line leaks that use hand labels. And if they have 2 pair, they're not going to fold to 35 on the river. So betting 35 on the river is a vast improvement on checking. And it comes down to that holding their range in your mind as a shape, as a thing, as like an object with properties, not as every individual hand they can have, but just as a, you'd be holding a ball in your hand, you'd know what it would feel like, right? Hold a ball or a lemon or a pencil or any other object. It'd just be a certain way it would feel to like interact with that object. And when you're range reading your opponent, it's important to sort of feel out what that range is. Like, what's it like? It's medium, it's lots of those kind of hands, right? You don't have to get super specific. Also not too vague.
Pete, quick question here.
Yeah, go for it.
So I would bet something like 2/3 pot in this pot, but I would have thought before about what happens if the villain re-raises or jams, and I would go in thinking, if they jam, I'm going to fold. Is that the right way to go about it?
I don't believe that you would normally fold that spot based on what I've seen in your game, but you're absolutely right. Out of game, it is a fold. Yeah, but I think if you played that hand, it's very likely that you wouldn't have folded in game for whatever reason based on your stats, but you're 100% right. Out of game, it is a fold, and I hope you're going to find that fold in future. So, yes, because again, it's the same pattern, right, that we saw in your game where they're not bluffing you and you don't beat value. So if those two things are true, how can you win? It's single digits again, right? So it is a fold, But most people can't find it because, again, if you bet half pot and they shove for 60, you'll be needing like 18% equity to call. Most people can't fold for that price, but it is a fold. Just like we saw in Chris's hand, it is a fold. Absolutely, yeah. Good.
Yeah, I mean, one way I try to address my blue line leaks is to have a pre-plan of what's going to happen if this happens. And I'm going to say, I'm going to block bet this, and if they re-raise, I'm going to fold. I go in with that plan.
Yes, but you also have to push yourself in the moment as well. You're not always going to be prepared, and it's not always going to be possible to have a plan. A plan is good, and it will help protect you. It's kind of like a vaccination, right? I'm going to take this inoculation against my stationary habits. But sometimes you're going to just be faced with unexpected aggression, and you're going to have to fold. Like, fold's going to be by far the right play, and you're going to have to just find that in the moment as well. So I'm okay with you having a plan, but not at the expense of you being able to adapt in the moment. You still need to be able to adapt in the moment if you come to a spot without a plan, or the plan suddenly changes, or you just didn't make the plan in time. You still have to be able to think on your feet, and I don't want to discourage you from thinking on your feet and finding folds that way too. Make sense?
That's fair.
Cool. Yeah. Right, Samantha, back to you then, as this is your review. Let's look at another spot where, let's see what villain had, or the chat will kill me. Yeah, so that's a very mergey hand, right? So when we say merged, Samantha, that's what we mean. They have a middle of the road hand like that, and that's going to be the heart of their range here in this spot. Everyone has a plan until they're check raised on the river. That's a bit like that Mike Tyson's quote, right? Okay, just make your standard 3-bet sizing bigger. Maybe you already do that now, and you've learned that. I know you're quite new to playing online and the sizes and stuff, but yeah, you want to go 10 here. Perfectly fine hand to 3-bet. You can also call this hand, by the way. So here we just have a very run-of-the-mill routine hand. And I don't have a problem with this hand, but I'm going to search for one that I do have a problem with that's similar to it, right? I just find a hand where you could have bluffed now, because we looked at one where you could have value bet. Here we go. Perfect. Okay. So this is the silent assassin of win rate in your case, Samantha. This is why your red line is kind of plummeting steadily downward. It's stuff like this. So the concept at play here is fold equity. So I said there's two currencies that we need to get our head around. That's why grade 1 starts with, in Silver Carrot, starts with value betting and then bluffing, so we can talk about equity, and then we can talk about fold equity. So sounds like you're getting your head around equity already. I don't know where you're up to with fold equity, but bluffing right now post-flop is a non-feature in your game for the most part, right? And that's what we're focusing on here. So we have Queen 6 deuce. Everybody checks, no problem. Everybody checks again. An ace comes in the river and they both check again. How would you describe their ranges at this point? What do you think they normally have? And what would be a good word to describe their range here, Samantha, do you think?
Let me give it a thought.
Mm-hmm.
We got under the gun and big blind here.
Yep.
I mean, the big blind is probably just riding the blinds out. There's like no additional investment required off them, so they're just checking and waiting to see whatever hits. That would be my guess. And under the gun, I would probably. I'm sorry. Did UTG just call or?
So it went call, check. So it's a limped pot.
And did they limp pre-flop as well?
Under the gun limp pre-flop, you limped pre-flop. Big blind check.
Everyone was on stilts. Okay. Yeah, I'm probably gonna put them on like 7-8, 9-7,
Okay.
10-8, like
okay, I'm gonna stop you.
Middle range.
So what you're doing there is that you're feeling a pressure to name hands, and you're naming random hands, the first hands that come to mind. They're not incoherent hands. Like someone could have 7-8, but they're too specific, right? They're far too specific. What I want you to do is talk in range descriptions, and I want you to focus on post-flop action sequences to do that. So instead of saying they can have 9-7 or 7-8, we're going to say, what strength of range do they have? If I force you to only speak in adjectives here when I say, what do you think their range is like? And I force you to talk in a post-flop language instead of a pre-flop one, is their range when they get to the river and check 3 times strong or is it weak? Just start with that.
I'm going to say weak.
Because they check 3 times. And if they had a good hand, they're going to bet at some point, probably. And that's enough. That's the spot solved. So the human population has a very weak range here. They don't have a queen because they would bet the flop or the turn with a queen because it would be top pair. They don't have an ace because they would bet the river with an ace. What do they have? Not 9-7. That was too specific. Actually, Jack Deuce and 8-5. It could be anything, right? This is a game where Under the Gun is a fish. They're limping random hands. You know, the big blind is, as you said, is checked with any 2 cards. It can be anything. So it's not about what hands they have. If you're thinking that hand reading, or you've associated the word hand reading with literal hands, it's no wonder that you're not really doing it yet. Because hand reading is actually about gauging strength and shape. And their shape here is merged. They have all sorts of random hands, and their strength is weak. And a very good word here is capped. They're capped at sub-queen X here. So if they're capped at something worse than a queen, and you have king high, what should you do?
Bet.
Bet and make them fold their hand that's better than king high but not very good, and just bet 7 big blinds. I know this is a bit more advanced now, but if you just bet 7 big blinds here, you'll get it through 90% of the time. 80-90% of the time, and it needs to work 66%. You'll print money long term. So,
okay,
what we're going to do for our mission statement with Your Game, Samantha, is firstly, we're going to, when we have value hand, we're going to try to be more objective about what our equity is instead of just reacting to like cards coming or whatever. We're going to try and estimate that equity a bit more objectively and then make sure we value bet when we need to. But I think the bigger problem in your game is not value betting, like you are doing that to a level that's acceptable at the moment, but it's bluffing, where that's the lowest hanging fruit for you. That's the biggest impact in your game, is fixing that. Because right now it's a non-entity in your game. And I don't want you to hand read specifically when it comes to bluffing or put them on an exact hand. Rather, I want you to just ask, where are they weak and likely to fold a lot, and where are they strong? And it's all about post-flop actions. That's what I want you to focus on. What did they do post-flop? Less about the positions, although you do want to know what happened pre, but more about what happened post-flop. Action sequences like this are very telling. They're very, very weak, and they're going to lead to overfolding. People folding too often to aggression. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah. Sorry, just taking some notes there.
Sure. I'm just finding another hand to finish on as well. Okay, so let's take this turn spot. I'll show you what happened pre-flop here. So there's a limper. We're in the cutoff. What could we have done better here?
Raise more?
Yeah, raise bigger. Put more money in the pot in a favorable, lovely situation where money is flowing our way. We go 3-way. 9-6-6. Check. Don't have a problem with that. Both opponents check to us. So on the flop, they both check to you. That's called a procedural check. They're checking to the raiser. That's something they'll do with lots of hands. That makes sense?
Yep.
But when you check, these turn checks are not procedural checks because you gave up the initiative. You didn't bet the flop. That makes you no longer the one they have to check to. So now they have what I call a free turn bet situation where it's normal for them to bet their good hands, and humans will. So when they both check again, what do you think that means about their ranges?
They're super capped.
Yeah. They might have ace high, they might have king queen, they might have a low pair. They might beat you sometimes. You might have the best hand sometimes too. But what do you think happens if you bet 12 big blinds here? It might be like a bit outside of your normal toolkit for now, that's fine, but what do you think would happen if you bet 12 big blinds here?
The chances are, if they don't have a made hand that they're, deliberately slow playing or whatever, then more often than not, they would fold, because hands like the ace high, like he said, don't really have, I don't know if it's the right term, but enough pot out, enough price to call here.
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't even need to be as technical as that. It can just be like they have bad hand and huge bet, so they fold, right? That's kind of, if you watch like a Luke Johnson, like a Clanty video, or one of these elite players, like high stakes elite crushers moving down and playing 5NL for content, you'll see that they literally just 3x pot the turn and the river in all these spots where they're just like, this will work almost always. And we don't have to be quite on that level to take a leaf out of their book and do the same thing when we're convinced that the opponents are by and large very capped. You don't even have to go 2x pot here, like 12 or 1.5x pot here. That's just to make a point. Even if you bet 6 big blinds here, what will happen is most of the time they'll fold. You'll get this through very often. When they call you, you'll be able to bluff a lot of river cards too, because their range will still be like one pair, a lot it'll be like a pair of 5s or something a lot of the time, or a draw. And you'll hit the river and be able to value bet with the best hand a lot too. So if you hit a king or a jack on the river, you get to value bet. That's a semi-bluff part of it. If they call and the river's a queen, you get to bluff really successfully. If they fold, it's really good. You can see why it's so good to bluff the turn here, right? When they show you that their ranges are this weak, this capped.
Yep.
I want you looking out for this. I want your single mission, because every student on this show is getting one mission for the week. It's going to be scavenging. It's going to be looking for pots where people have told you post-flop that they have a weak range. And here's the key part. And your hand doesn't win that much by checking it down. If you have ace-queen here, you shouldn't bluff, because you're going to do very well by checking, and it's no longer worth it to bluff. You're doing too well on the branch where you check for that to be worth it. But when you only have king-jack or queen-jack here or something, now it is worth it for you to bluff, because you're making your opponents fold so many hands that beat you. So I want you to ask that question. Where are they weak? Where are they capped? And where do I need to bluff? Where is my hand low enough down that it needs to bluff? And I want you doing it and not worrying about what happens next. If you get called, you get called. It will happen sometimes. I want you doing it. And over time, you'll realize that a bluff of 4 big blinds or 6 big blinds here gets them to both fold 75% of the time or something like that. You'll see it happen, and you'll begin to realize that it's good and it's valuable and it's adding to your win rate.
Okay.
Any questions?
Not right now.
Okay, so the floor is open to all of you then. Let's just summarize, decompress here, and do a debrief. How are we feeling about today?
Good. I feel like I have some action items to take forward. I also did the starter course that you released, where you explained the league types. I actually did that yesterday. So good stuff.
I'm really intrigued to hear what it said, because in the free starter kit, just to tell the audience how it works, episode 1 explains the league types, episode 2 shows you how to review a hand. In episode 3, there's 2 worksheets that come with episode 3 on the video page when you've got the starter kit. There's the mission tracker that actually allows you to play 1,000 hands, stop at key moments, fill out some hand reviews. But before you do that, there's the leak checker, which is where you actually score statements that I read out in the video to then figure out which type of leak, red, blue, or green, applies the most to you. Again, red being bad bets and raises, blue being bad calls, and green being bad checks and folds. What were your scores, if you don't mind sharing? Like, which one won and by how much when you assigned your primary leak?
Based on those statements, the blue leaks won by 1 point. I think it was 4 points. For the blue leagues, 3 points for the red leagues, and the green leagues is where I'm doing the best.
Mm-hmm.
When I fold or when I check, it's almost never incorrect.
Yep.
Yep. It's the other way around.
Yep. Yeah, we saw that in your graph as well, that you did have both blue and red, but blue was worse, and that's why we focused on that. So you can see that the leak checker in the starter kit, at least in Vinod's case, has accurately diagnosed what I diagnosed as a coach. I can't be here one-to-one with all of you guys, but I can give you that leak checker so that you can at least find your primary leak on your own without me being there, or me being there in video form. And then have you started that 1,000-hand mission then, where you're going to stop at 4 junctures and review blue leak hands?
So, I've already been sort of tagging my hands on Coin Poker, you know, where if I suspect something is a blue leak or a bad, you know, bluff catch, I tag that right away. So I've already been doing that.
Good. And I want you to only focus, as it says in the starter kit videos, only focus on that leak for now. We're actually just trying to fix the primary leak. That's the mission statement, not do too much at once. A lot of the students we've had on this show, guys, you'll notice that they've, apart from maybe in Samantha's case, where, as she says, she's more of like the rookie that's just learning, but in the case of every other student I think we've had on this show so far, they've been trying to do too much, they've been projecting too much, they've been coming up with too many convoluted thoughts and putting them onto their opponents, and they've not been addressing their primary leak enough and taking enough ownership of it. And it's so often the case, and that's why we start there on Carrot Corner. Before you get into bronze, silver, and gold, start with the starter kit, guys. Check it out. Click the link in the video. Do the leak checker. See what your primary leak is. I didn't have the mustache when I was recording it, so it'll be easier viewing than today as well.
One other thing I've done is I mean my primary goal is live, because you know I feel like that's where I can make the most money, you know. But one thing I've consciously done is dial down the amount I play. You know, trying to stick to the 60-40 ratio, study to play ratio. You know, so I've been setting stricter time limits on, you know, how long I play. You know, so I'm playing at my best. You know, for the limited time that I do.
Yep. And take a lot of pride in folds. And if you make a fold and you're not sure whether it was a good fold, be happy about it anyway, because the fold button is going to help you. It's going to save you. And the call button is going to throw you deeper into that plummeting blue line, losing green line, winning red line thing that we don't want to see anymore, right? So trust the fold button, even if you can't see through the fog. Trust that it's the right button to press anyway, and press it in times of duress.
Yeah, Club WPT actually has this AI feature, you know, where it sort of analyzes your hands and gives you like a summary. It basically tells me that I've made 0 bad folds, you know. So
I believe it.
Yeah,
I believe it. Yep. Chris, anything you wanna say? Ask?
No, yeah. I think your analysis jives with basically what I've kind of diagnosed with like self-diagnosed. Yeah, I really just need to improve at not projecting onto my opponent, trying to understand how the population is playing rather than like how I would play in their shoes. Mm-hmm. And just stop making bad investments. Stop making, you know, bad calls, bad bluffs.
Yeah, you remind me of the guy Nate from last week, who again was trying to run before he could walk a little bit and was using higher level range versus range, the context that ought to be there in theory as justification for pressing a button, and that just never follows, right? That context is never the justification for pressing a button. You need the substance.
I think there's something. I don't remember if you said this to Nate specifically, but you said something about like you're not qualified to make this play yet. I've had that running in my head while playing this week. Like, am I qualified to fucking bluff here? Like, do I even know what's going on? You know?
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's it. And like, if you're trying to bluff because your range ought to be scary, that's kind of like putting on a Halloween mask and chasing a gorilla or something. It's just, that's one of the weirdest analogies ever, but they're not buying it. Even though you think it's scary and it's a scary mask, still just gonna eat you anyway, right? Like, there are a lot of these opponents, if they have aces or kings in that hand that we looked at, they don't care what your mask is. They don't care what range you're representing. They don't care that you're the pre-flop caller and you have all the combos of sets and 10-9 and that it's more concentrated in your range and blah blah blah. They have kings, man, and you're just putting 160 big blinds against a fish that has kings, and you have a bluff, and that's not a good thing. So it's just about like, when is their range now too much kings? Now I back off. That's it. When's that happening? That's your key mission. Identify that point in the filtering in the hand. I want to echo what In Through the Window says. Thank you so much to all three of you for being here, for putting yourselves out there, for putting your game on the line. You're really the winners here because you're getting it reviewed, but it's still it's a brave thing to do. A lot of people in chat here probably wouldn't like to be in these hot seats, so kudos to you all, and we'll be back next Tuesday with the third out of this 4-part stream series where we'll review more databases. I hope you'll all join me for that. You may get reviewed again there. See how it goes. Yeah, we'll play it by ear. But what I'd like to do next is that after we've diagnosed primary leaks, I would like to start looking at some common nodes and getting really good at them if we have time in this series. We might not, but we'll see how we go. All right, everyone. I'll see you later. Check out the starter kit, everyone, if you've not already. And